When I was invited to do this talk, I almost said no. I have a bit of imposter syndrome standing here today, because I'm talking about a species that you've probably seen many, many times, the Eurasian red squirrel. To me, the red squirrel means probably a lot more than you, because in where I'm from, in London, red squirrels are extinct. So to me, they were this rare species. And when I came to Sweden 5 years ago, I was amazed that they were everywhere. My name is Dani. I'm a professional wildlife photographer, squirrel photographer, and Canon ambassador. And I have been doing photography now for 15 years, and a lot of people are surprised when they hear that. It was always a dream for me to be a professional wildlife photographer, and I never thought it would be achievable, so I never really made it a target. And I became a professional just a few years ago. I've recently realized that what we now consider professional wildlife, or just photography in general, has changed so much thanks to social media. And being a professional wildlife photographer doesn't necessarily mean you need to photograph the most elusive animal or go to the most extreme locations. You can just do it with a squirrel. So I'll talk a little bit about my journey to become a professional wildlife photographer. It actually started when I wanted to photograph my dog. I started to notice nature because I wanted to photograph him in a woodland. And so when I was quite young, I would go to the woodland, take photos of birds or like blue tits, small birds, because in London there's not that much wildlife. And I would enter competitions, win awards, sell the cameras, and then buy nice gear. So at a young age, I had quite nice equipment just because I had this constant cycle of buying something, selling it, or winning something, selling it, and then buying a nice camera. I went on to studying zoology, and I thought that becoming a researcher or ecologist was the best way to connect people to the natural world. So I actually went deeper into this scientific route, and I spent a lot of time in the rainforest. I spent many months studying spider monkeys in Costa Rica, and we had this really interesting research. So spider monkeys are rainforest architects, which I'll explain in a bit, but they have this ecological role in seed dispersal. And they will travel long, long distances in the rainforest to find these fruiting trees. This is a composite of many images of this spider monkey jumping. And they will travel many, many miles, as I discovered. I was literally following them from sunrise to sunset, sometimes walking 18 miles a day in complete unknown old-growth rainforest with just a compass and a GPS. And our research was looking at what they eat and the potential of what they eat. So in this image, you can see lots of fruit. And so they're frugivores. They will go long distances finding different fruit. They swallow most of the fruit whole with the seed. And then they sleep at very specific trees. And as you can see, that branch, that dark branch, they will all sleep in a line together, the whole family, and directly underneath, you have a latrine. So they go for the toilet, the whole seed or stone of the fruit will come in a certain area, and you can see all these young saplings. So their role in seed dispersal basically helps build a rainforest. And I thought I'd include this photo, which was taken very dark. That's why it's not the greatest. But these are drunk spider monkeys. And I saw things that no one had seen before. So they were eating some vines. And when I saw them, I was like, what is going on? What are they doing? Their mouth was completely frothing. So they had all this saliva, and they were just covering themselves with this saliva, and they were holding each other. And I went to my lead researcher and I said, I have no idea what was going on. And he said they were probably drunk because, one, they were young spider monkeys, that you can see the rings around their eyes are quite light. That means they're quite young. So either they made a mistake and they started eating the wrong food, or they were doing it because they were trying to keep parasites down. So they were covering themselves in something that would deter, like bot flies or mosquitoes, or they just wanted to have fun. Very potential. So I had spent all this time with these spider monkeys, and I had this idea that if I had this amazing photo story, I could sell it. And so this is my idea of what it was to be a professional wildlife photographer. And so I had this upcoming internship with BBC Wildlife. And so I sat down with the head photo editor. I said, this is my photo story. We're going to publish the research in a few months. And he said, very, very good, but you're missing images. And I had one more trip left to get the last research. So I went back to the rainforest. I got the exact images he said I should get, and then he ignored me. And I never heard back. So I thought I had this great photo story, brand new scientific research. That should be enough. It wasn't. I'm not sure, and I won't go into it, but I sort of gave up with this idea of becoming a professional wildlife photographer. I had spent so long trying to get these images, getting the research, publishing it, and in the end, I moved to London. I worked at the Natural History Museum, I worked at some zoos, and I was sort of losing my mission of how to connect people to nature, how to connect people to the natural world. And after working in London, I thought, no, I have to go back to the research. So I'd managed to get a position to do a 4-year PhD in Peru, and then COVID happened. Fed up with the city, I quickly took a trip to Sweden. I thought I was going to stay for 10 days. COVID happened, so I stayed for 6 months. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and it completely changed the course of, well, my journey. So I went to this golden eagle hide. I photographed eagles, goshawks, foxes, all the, sexy species. And then on the last day, we got the red squirrel. And I was going crazy, and they were all looking at me like, it's a squirrel. But for me, this is very unique. It was the second squirrel I'd ever seen, red squirrel I'd ever seen. So red squirrels to me are a bit like Pokemon. The only other one I'd seen is in Scotland. They're extinct in London, and they're everywhere in Sweden. I'm sure you have them in Helsinki. But to me, they were just so exciting, and I became obsessed. So I had the option of going home, and I thought, yeah, going home to my parents' house for 6 months, Sweden. So I stayed in Sweden. And for those curious, I'm at the same latitude as Oulu, so I'm quite north. So the more time I spent with the red squirrels, I realized a few things. Firstly, you can identify different individuals quite easily, or at least for me. So I could tell males, females, the more dominant ones, and I realized they have very unique traits and mannerisms. I initially got the basic sort of standard portraits, and then I tried to do some more exciting photography. What you're seeing right now, well, I'll explain how I took the photo. But I had the camera inside this old abandoned timber truck, which has been left in the forest for 60 years. And I had a flash on the bonnet on the front of this car, and in the middle, there's the squirrel. So what you're actually seeing is the shadow of the squirrel, not the squirrel itself. It took a bit of experimentation, but it's one of my favorite photos, just because you can see the iconic shape of a squirrel. And so I was doing all sorts of different fun things with squirrels. And at this time, I had around 4,000 followers on social media. And I realized that people really engage with stories of individual animals. So I gave my squirrels names. This is Remy. She was always the most bold. Every time I set a camera trap, she was the first one. Unfortunately, Remy got hit by a car, and when I shared this story, people were, very heartbroken. But I went to the forest the next day, and I found her kits, or her baby squirrels. And they had teeth, so they were old enough that I could just provide water and food, and that was enough to keep them going. But I was documenting all aspects of their life, learning how to explore the forest, play fighting, all of this. And there was one thing I was missing, which was the sounds they make when they eat. When squirrels, or baby squirrels especially, are sitting close to each other, they try to tell each other, don't bother me, this is my food, don't come near me. And so they make this very cute squeaking sound. So, as you can see, the squirrel isn't saying, leave me alone, to another squirrel, it's saying it to my microphone. But I posted this on Twitter, and this was before sort of TikTok and super viral content. And in 48 hours, I had 18 million views and 60,000 followers. To me, that was crazy. And I had all these different opportunities coming up, like also, it's COVID, so a lot of news and media reporters wanted good news stories. So I went on TV in Brazil, Russia, China. But the craziest one is that I got an email from a guy, and he said, I want to use the sound in a movie. And I was just like, that's fake. So I ignored it. And he was very persistent, and he said, let's have a call. So I called him, and I went on IMDb. He's a Hollywood sound designer. He's won Oscars, so he wanted to use the sound in a movie called Dune. So if you've watched Dune Part 1 and Part 2, you'll recognize this squirrel. After 5 years of photographing red squirrels, there's some key things that I look for when I photograph them. One of the main things is I always try to show the tail, because without it, they can become a bit ratty looking. Let's talk a bit about the sort of biology of a red squirrel. Red squirrels are arboreal mammals. They spend most of their time up in the trees, and they also, like the spider monkeys, have an ecological role in seed dispersal. They mostly eat pine cones and spruce cones, and it's quite amazing watching them get one of the cones, because they will take each shell, and underneath is a seed, so they will go through this pine cone, ripping out all the shells to get to the seeds. I have seen them active the coldest -32. Any colder, they seem to sleep and wake up when it gets a bit warmer. This is where they sleep, in drays, which is like a nest-like structure. Or they will sleep within old woodpecker nests. I've seen that they often will sleep in the trees in winter, and in the summer they have these lichen drays. They spend a lot of time collecting lichen and moss, and that's what they line the inside of the dray to keep them warm. Most squirrels will actually have 2 to 3 drays, especially females, because after a few weeks of having their babies, they'll move them to another dray, and this keeps ectoparasites down in the dray. Some dopamine for you. Mother squirrels tend to have 3 to 4 kits, And the baby squirrels will stay with their mum until they're around 12 weeks old, and then they become independent. So this is an artificial dray that I built. Building this thing was a whole story, and I've got a whole video on it. These are 3 baby squirrels, and this is what you initially see in the dray. I had to control my camera via the internet, so I'm not going to fully go into how I took the photos and videos, but I basically would have to access the camera when they're not there. So I was constantly watching when they would all leave, then I would run to the camera and maybe change a card or change any settings. So that whole story is on YouTube if you're interested. So after spending the first few weeks in the dray with their mum, they will then start exploring, and they're very fragile when they're first born, and I was very surprised to see how terrible they are initially. They fall out of the tree all the time, so it takes time for them to learn how to jump through the trees, and I was just like, oh my God, because they can fall like 15 meters. And so they spend a lot of time with their siblings, like playing, exploring, and even when mum kicks them out of the territory, they will still spend some weeks with their siblings. Red squirrels are truly fantastic animals. They helped me realize that you don't have to focus on the most extreme environments like the rainforest or on brand new research. I really realized with red squirrels that if I focus on one subject that is very relatable to people, squirrels, not red squirrels, but squirrels can be found on almost every continent. So it doesn't matter whether you're in India, America, or Europe, there are squirrels, obviously different species, but people relate to them. And I think that's why, even though I share red squirrels, anywhere in the world, people engage with my content. So my initial thoughts on what it is to be a professional photographer were challenged. I realized that if I could tell my own stories, and if people would watch and engage and connect with it, I could really do whatever I want. So because of squirrels, I now have an audience on social media, and that allows me to travel and go on my dream trips or photograph the dream species, but it's the squirrels that fund everything else. The other thing I learned is that being a professional wildlife photographer is not necessarily just about the photos and my skills to take the photos. It's also the ability to share a story and to get people to connect with what I'm photographing. As I said, they're accessible. You could go, most of you have probably seen a squirrel, but have you heard of a professional squirrel photographer? Probably not. I realized that if I created an engaging narrative around a common subject, I could use them as my leverage to basically be a professional wildlife photographer. Now I focus on YouTube mostly, and I share my stories of going on amazing trips or even just living at home in northern Sweden, photographing the squirrels. Last year, I worked with my audience to raise the funds to buy the squirrel forest where I photograph. So I've now realized with this community, I can actually do a lot more for now for conservation. And just a month ago, I raised $8,000 with my community for a shelter in the Amazon who rehabilitate monkeys and release them. The beautiful thing about being a YouTuber and content creator is that I pick the story, I pick the location. As long as I can find a sponsor, I can pretty much do whatever I want. So earlier this year, I went to Greenland, which was cold. It's amazing just to be able to basically choose the subjects I want to photograph. In regards to kit, I used 2 R5s. I'm a bit of a minimalist, so to me, having 2 different cameras is too much. Obviously, because I'm doing YouTube, I'm often talking to one camera and then filming, I'm filming myself photograph or film wildlife. And so to me, it's easier to have two of the exact same cameras. I have the 400mm f2.8 as my main lens, but I actually find that a zoom lens, a 100 to 500, is often better for telling a story because I can zoom out and show the whole environment or scene, zoom in, show just the face, or maybe even zoom in more and focus on something specific like the eyes or the feet, and that helps share a story. And if I've got a zoom lens, I'm more flexible. I won't go into the other kit. I thought I'd share some of my personal tips on being a professional photographer. I can see some people a bit confused what they're looking at, so I'll just explain. This is a puffin with its wings like this. So I've just captured the moment you can see the bill. My tips: create your own opportunities. If you have a specific project or a specific animal, there is probably someone who will be interested in supporting you. For me, I often will go to many brands and say, I've got this idea, and most of them say no, but someone might say yes. I've also learned to value my worth, which I didn't at the start. And the thing with this is that many people will say no, and that's fine. Someone might say yes in supporting a project. And this happens with wildlife photography or nature photography or photography in general these days, is that a lot of people want you to work for free or to provide photos for free. And I think it's important as photographers we value our work, especially with the rise of AI and being able to create an image so easily. It's so important that we value what we take. The effort, the story that we put behind those images are valuable. The other thing I've learned is that views and likes and followers don't mean anything. The more I've grown, the more my videos get more viewers, it doesn't matter. The main thing is your core audience, who might be 10 or 5% of your following, or the people who buy your books or view your images. They are the most important, so treat them like gold. The more I've worked on the squirrels, I've realized you don't need to have the most exciting animal. And for me, I can engage people with something as common and basic as a squirrel. So it's not necessarily always about Arctic foxes or very elusive animals. I am now very lucky to travel to amazing locations, but it's all thanks to the red squirrels, and I will always return to them. The more I photograph the squirrels, the more images I can see or envision that I haven't captured. And I still love traveling, and I've been lucky enough to go to Antarctica. I'm going back again this January. This is a penguin highway, so with time they will trample a path, and they will stick to the same path. And as you can see, this one is just waiting for that one to pass. So he's on the side waiting for the penguin to pass. Yeah, so I go to all these crazy places, but at the end of the day, to me, it's all about the red squirrels. And if you're interested, at the Canon stand, I'm actually printing some squirrel photos, and you're welcome to take one. So, thank you.